Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Podcast. Today we are doing abortion.
Ooh.
I am Charles.
I'm Bradley, and today we have a guest, my lovely wife, Alex. We have dragged her into it.
Hello.
Yeah, we threw it at her apparently today,
Right.
although I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but that's fine.
Okay,
So,
whatever works.
yeah, Charles was the one insisting on having a guest. I was fine with it. I wasn't against it, but you were the one that...
I wanted to bring you on, Alex, for two big reasons. Number one, personally, I do ultimately think that the arena of abortion debate is an arena that belongs to women. So I don't think that an abortion debate is... I think it's way less credible if you don't have women as part of it. I do think that. I also wanted to bring you on because you're pro-life, which I think is going to provide a pretty interesting perspective, because I feel like a lot, not all, but some pro-choicers kind of ignore the fact that women are pro-life to make things more convenient for them. So I wanted to bring you on to hopefully have listeners maybe treat this as an actual intellectual exercise rather than just disregarding everything me and Bradley say because we're men. Right?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, it's, from my perspective, it's a choice between the woman and her partner who got her pregnant, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's not, in my opinion, it's not just up to a woman to decide if that baby gets to actually come into the world and experience life outside the womb, but it's, you're also potentially depriving a man of being a father and experiencing
mm-hmm.
fatherhood. And I know some men dream of being a father. It's not something we talk about a lot. I mean, some girls grow up dreaming of being moms, and that like stereotypical, oh, this girl, like, I grew up dreaming about my wedding and what my wedding was gonna be like, and I want to be a mom so bad. But people don't really think about the fact that some men just want to be dads.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something that they would love to do in life. So
if a girl, if the woman wanted an abortion and the man wanted a child, what would you say about that?
It's tricky, right?
It is tricky.
And I think this is going to be a topic where no matter who you are, there's not going to be a right answer, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody has a different opinion, so nobody's going to see it the exact same way. But I think if the woman doesn't want the baby, but the man does, there is also the option of going through the pregnancy and relinquishing the baby at the end, right? And just saying, okay, you want to be a dad, I don't want to be a mom, you can just have the kid. But that's a conversation between two adults that needs to happen.
Because you're saying at that point, it's the baby's life or the potential mom's, if the dad was to take it and say, like, I'll leave your life, right?
Yeah.
You're saying the debate is a kid's life or the mom's, like, discomfort and inconvenience for the pregnancy plus post-pregnancy.
Yeah, for sure. But I also...
And I think that's a pretty lopsided... Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's what it came down to, if you were able to say, okay, I'm pregnant, give birth and stuff, like, it is a pretty drastic...
I've seen, like, a lot of my...
There's a difference in severity, kind of.
Like, I've seen a lot of my friends go through pregnancies. Some of them have, like, the easiest pregnancies I've ever seen. Some of them really have major health struggles. And,
mm-hmm.
A good friend of ours was basically bedridden for most of her pregnancy. But, it is a case of you made the choice. Like, are you gonna actually face the consequences, or are you gonna turn away from your consequences, right?
So in cases where it wasn't a choice, and let's say conceiving the baby was an accident.
Well, okay, I would make the argument that the risks also at that point, right? That contraception isn't,
mm-hmm.
just depending on the contraception method, very not reliable.
Well,
right? Like,
I was an accident. My parents definitely did not want a fourth kid. They already had, like, my first sister.
You were accidents.
Well, both my sisters were accidents. My mom actually had a late term miscarriage, so my mom had a stillbirth at 29 weeks.
Oh, wow.
That baby was an accident as well. My brother was planned because,
mm-hmm.
that's just how my mom wanted to do things after losing that baby. And then I was definitely an accident.
Right.
But, two adults, they know the risks involved with having sex, right?
So I don't know how personal you guys want to get. We can always
for it.
cut this out of the podcast like after if you don't feel comfortable. But
Go
so
for it.
you two waited until marriage to have sex.
Yeah.
Right? So by the time that you started having sex, you both had pretty stable jobs. You had a lot of money
Watch
in
your
the
dad
bank.
listen to this
And,
podcast.
and like you had a house, right? So it's you guys, although you don't want a kid right now, if an accident happened, you could carry the baby to term and not have your life be drastically changed. But if you're not in that position, and because most people aren't at the stage that you guys are by the time you start having sex, right? So I don't know, if you're like a teenager and one of those accidents happens and like carrying the baby to term would mean a fundamentally disastrous,
Like dropping out of school or stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Once again, though, like, if you're a teenager having unprotected sex, so you're not, like, or I guess protected, it could be an accident, right? But you know the risk, too, right? And you're talking about the life of, we'll get into some statistics here that I want to talk about later. But the life of something, right? The life of something being ended for you having a slip up. Like, having whatever that margin of error was, right? In that form of protection. Like,
Well,
you know the risk, the baby doesn't have a choice in those risks. Right, so I guess that's the argument to that, and it's not you're gonna live past it. You will live, right? Like the mom, the father. It might suck and be hugely.
I mean, it depends. I mean, yes, you will live, but it's like,
but
it's more complicated than that for some people, though,
for
right?
something. Like, but is it more suiting for that to be the price they pay or that the baby pays?
I think
because right, like
so my argument would be my only thing. I would say I'm 95% pro-choice. My only thing is term limits.
Yeah.
Right? That's my only shtick. So I would say aborting a child at 10 weeks, I don't really think that applies because it's not a human being at that point. Right? Like I know your guys' argument is that it has the potential to become one, so that's enough.
So would you say
right?
I think I mentioned to Alex, like would you say if the baby's capable of being a premature birth? Like
so that's actually
a no kind of.
Well, we have notes here. I took a lot of notes. That's in the abortion legislation. That's called viability. Like that's the term, and that's what the U.S. uses as a
like an absolute no go kind of or something or what?
Well,
there's basically like cutoff points, like up until this amount of time.
It's another way of breaking down.
So the U.S. Supreme Court clarified in 1992 that a woman has the right to abort her fetus prior to viability, after which the state can intervene by implementing restrictions. Right. So now that's still complicated because what do you mean by viability? Right.
Yeah.
That's open to interpretation.
But it's meant to provide a ceiling. It's kind of providing a ceiling of like, okay, anything past this is on you, kind of. Sure. Right. But states can add extra rules. They just can't supersede that.
Well, so the federal rule has no ceiling whatsoever. The federal rule is saying that it's up to states entirely to determine what the ceiling is.
No, but they said you can't go past viability.
No, they said a woman has the right to abort a fetus prior to its viability, after which the state can intervene if it decides.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So they're saying that states can't even say before that, or I guess they could argue that viability is.
Well, that's the term viability is open to interpretation. So in Texas, for example, that heartbeat bill.
Yeah.
The way the Texas legislation interprets the term viability is when your baby has a heartbeat, which is at like 6 weeks, which to my understanding is before most women even know that they're pregnant, which makes the whole
point moot kind of.
It's a dumb compromise,
way of being pro-life
right?
Without
right, exactly. Like you're trying to compromise, but it's a terrible compromise because what's even the point, right?
Okay. One thing I want to say, then I'll keep names out of it. I know someone. They were both pregnant. Well, she was pregnant. He got her pregnant. Yeah. She wanted the abortion and he didn't. And he also had the mind of like religious reasons for not wanting the abortion. Okay. And stuff. And she just said, "Too bad, I'm getting it anyway." And then she's like, went and booked it and did it.
Okay.
So
what do you? I would support her entirely. I would think it's her choice.
So you don't think he has any choice in it whatsoever? That he wants.
He has a say. He has a say on a personal level between them as a couple. But she has the complete legal right to go do that. I don't think that's an issue. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I don't know, but like, is that not going to cause my thing? Would be like. No, I guess like legally, it's hard to say. Like, no, you got to figure out who the dad is potentially, and then like he gets to say. There's no like legality there, but even the idea that like, the damage you'd be doing to a dad that's super against abortion, right? Like if you go and know that your kid just got aborted, your potential potential kid. You know what I mean, right? Like in their mind, their kid, their potential kid, or whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. Like you're talking like potentially like massive scarring and damage from there too, right? That I think isn't considered.
Right.
Because I think people are considering. People say woman's body, woman's choice. It's like, well, there is more to it. It is more complex than that.
But you don't think there's potential for scarring on the women's side if she now has to carry a baby to term?
No, well, I'm just saying you saying that's 100% her, not you, but like one saying it's 100% her choice is disregarding.
I think ultimately it's like her husband or her boyfriend or whatever can have an input. It's not like he has no say whatsoever, but I think ultimately when it comes down to it, if they just fundamentally disagree, I think it's on her to be able to go and do whatever she wants.
Yeah. Well, I'm speaking more to not the legality of it, but the like.
I mean,
the
it
moral
sucks. Like if the guy
questioning of it.
wanted the kid, it sucks.
Yeah.
Like it's really, and I'm sure he could be emotionally scarred by that.
Because
but at the end of the day, I just don't think it's
the
his
woman's
decision.
body, it's woman's choice is kind of. It's a little. It's a huge simplification of the matter, right? Like it's not that binary. Like it makes it sound like you're disregarding other considerations.
So what do you think?
There you
about
go.
that?
That's something.
Yeah. Over to
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and I think I said this before we started the podcast, but I feel like it should be said on record. Mm-hmm. Just because I disagree with people doesn't mean I'm gonna, go picket outside of an abortion clinic or. Go berate women for the choices that they make.
Yeah.
If you're choosing to get an abortion, I disagree fundamentally with your choice, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to stop you. Mm-hmm. Right? It's kind of like there's lots of things in life where you disagree with other people, but it's not. You shouldn't be just going up and stopping people and saying, no, this is what I believe, so that means you can't do it, right? It's kind of...
I'm curious, though, about your opinion on the dynamic between, like what Bradley said, the mother and the husband wanting it and the mother saying no.
That's really complicated. Like, and it's hard because, it depends, do you kind of suffer through that pregnancy? It's literally suffering through a pregnancy because you don't want it.
Right. Just
so you can give this man the baby that he wants. But
it's more than that too.
It is more than that.
It's also the life of the.
Yeah, it is. But if you're just going on if we're just talking about that choice, we're not considering the life that's at stake right here. We're just talking about the choice between this this woman and this man.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer here. I don't think there's an easy answer.
We're not talking about the legality of it right now, right?
Sure.
We're talking about the
on a personal level.
or personal moral level.
Sure.
Of it, right?
I mean, this is also a case you probably won't find this super often because it's also for an example, as an example, like when parents get divorced, usually custody goes to the mother because generally the mother wants more either like the bulk
the
of
instinct.
You either want the bulk of the custody or full custody of the kids, whereas the dad is like, oh well, I got to work anyways, so it's not like I have time to take care of the kid.
Yeah.
But I would actually be interested if there was a case like this, if the woman does proceed with the abortion, if the man could actually go in and sue her. I would be interested to see if there's a case, like a legal case in the past, probably in the state. I mean, people sue each other left, right, and center.
There was a pretty famous case. I don't know if it's in my notes here. But
it's not, try to
there was some Quebec case about a woman wanting an abortion and her boyfriend or husband or whatever trying to force her to take it to term, and I think that's part of what led the Supreme Court of Canada to make the ruling that sorry, I have my notes here about it.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
I think here's kind of I'm not diverting too far. Okay. Here's also kind of where I sit on it. As somebody who's married, you love your husband deeply, or if you have a partner that you see yourself staying with long term, you love that person deeply, and you do anything for them, right? Mm-hmm. And it comes to a point where it's like, if you are disagreeing fundamentally on that, I feel like your relationship should almost be called into question there too.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
So, and I'm like, we're not talking about this girl had a one night stand and she knows who the father is.
No, but you're saying
he wants the baby, right?
You've been dating for a couple of years, been married or whatever, and you have that big of a disagreement.
Yeah, you have a long history together, and you're in a committed relationship. I mean, I don't see it happening super often, but I'm sure it could happen.
It has happened.
Yeah, and that's for sure.
It's not on my notes here, you guys, but I do remember there was a case, and I think
Quebec.
In Quebec, either the late 80s or the 90s, where a man wanted to force his partner to take a baby to term, and then the Supreme Court ruled that was unconstitutional and violated her security of the person, and that's now we're encroaching into the legal domain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, would you guys draw some distinction in your opinions between late-term abortions and early-term abortions?
I wouldn't.
No.
We'll get to that too. But like I said, I think the grounds that I would say would be like medical reasons. Definitely.
There are virtually no countries in the world that restrict abortions even if the woman's life is at danger. That's pretty much a universal.
Like even
I think you worded that wrong. But
Did I word that wrong?
He said
there are very few countries that don't allow abortion if the woman's life is at danger. Is in danger.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I don't know what he said before. I thought maybe you had like a double negative.
Fair
anyway,
that's like a universal.
Even Poland allows it, and they're like the strictest.
Sure. Even Saudi Arabia allows it.
The one other the one for me that would be like, ooh, this is a hot topic would be like a rape situation.
Well, and that's as somebody who's pro-life, that's a good spot to kind of play devil's advocate and like, you know, if you're having a conversation pro-life to pro-life, like, you know, what happens if a woman is raped and there's a pregnancy that is a result of that rape?
Yeah, I think that is the one where I'm like, I don't even know. Like,
I do know somebody who has a son who's the result of a rape.
Ooh. Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah, did
she want to abort it or was she just okay?
So she was a client of mine last summer, so almost a year ago. I haven't seen her in quite a while, but she opened up to me and she said that this guy she was dating, she thought he was a really good guy, thought that this was the guy she wanted to marry, and while they were still dating, he raped her. And 6 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant.
Wow.
And
so Bradley said he didn't really have an opinion, but what's yours?
No,
if your client wanted to get an abortion,
I'll go through. Like I'll just kind of explain kind of what she explained to me. So she was very torn if she wanted to keep that baby or not. Half of her family wanted her to abort the baby, and half of them wanted her to keep it. So it was like straight 50-50. Even she was 50-50. She had no idea what she wanted to do. She ended up keeping the baby. He's now 6, I think.
Okay.
And I asked her straight up, I said, do you regret keeping him? And she said at first she did, because when she had, throughout the entire pregnancy, it was just a reminder of this horrible thing that happened to her. Wow. And then when she first had the baby, it was just this like human, because he kind of looks like the dad, right?
Yeah, right.
So she said at first, she's like, it was so hard. She went to therapy for a couple years kind of thing. But she said that had she actually gotten the abortion, she probably would have regretted it down the road.
So she's good with the kid now.
Oh yeah. And she has such a good relationship with her son, and she's such a good mom. She's since gotten remarried. Got married. To, I think I met her current husband, I think once, super nice guy. And I think like they want kids together, and you know, he thought he did think it was weird at first that she kept that baby, because even for him it's a reminder that the woman that he married was raped.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know, Bradley as my husband, would you want a constant reminder that I was raped?
No, I think there'd be several reasons. Well, you wouldn't want that reminder, right? But yeah.
But at the same time, like, you know, she said if she had gotten that abortion, she probably would have lived in regret.
Okay.
And she's not necessarily pro-life, and she's not like 100% pro. I think she's pro-choice in certain circumstances, and this is the one circumstance I was thinking about, is, you know, what happens if you get pregnant because you get raped?
Right.
You know, what do you do?
I feel like at that point it's past that, you get past the politics of it. Now you're as personal as it gets. Right?
So I want to clarify too. It's not that I don't have an opinion. My opinion would be probably keep the baby, but it would be such a I completely acknowledge the loaded minefield that would be, and like the compelling arguments from the other side. Because you can get really nitpicky with it. Like, what if it was like a 14-year-old girl?
Yeah.
In middle school at that point, right? Like, you can get to like some pretty drastic opinions, and those are, I think there's like scary implications on either side. Like,
so would you say, sort of blanket, aside from the mother's life is in danger, you're just not for abortions in any situation whatsoever?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if you noticed, I didn't actually answer that question there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
Sorry.
know.
Sorry.
No,
Okay.
and there's a reason for that, because I don't know.
Really?
I don't know. I mean, do I believe abortion's wrong? Yeah, absolutely. But if I were put in that situation, I guarantee that would cross my mind, because it would cross any woman's mind.
So would you, if you were put in that situation, would you not prefer to be in a country where a right to abortion is protected? Would that not make you feel more comfortable?
So, yeah.
I think the security in that, here's the thing. I guarantee I would probably 100% be keeping that baby, just because of, like, I would not be able to live.
I guarantee I would probably be 100% keeping the baby.
I think like mentally I would not be able to live with myself if I knew I did that.
That's
because
fair.
of my own personal convictions and beliefs. But
Well, your convictions and beliefs, believing that it's still like murder to some degree, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like you're talking about this rape's a horrible situation.
But like Charles said, yeah, I would 100% feel more safe and secure in a country where even just having that thought cross my mind doesn't scare me, because I think I'm, going to get arrested, or I'm going to have to go get it done in some sketchy back alley with a coat hanger, right?
Yeah,
like,
right. So I want to ask you guys one more question before I move on to stats.
Okay.
Do you guys have would you guys separate what you believe is wrong with what you believe should be legally protected? Like, even though you think abortion is wrong, do you think it should be legally protected as an option for people?
Say in this case no, because like I said, in my mind it is murder, right, to some degree.
So you do think that abortion should be illegal entirely?
I think no, I don't think, maybe not illegal, but I think it should be harder to get it then. A lot harder to get it in some
but not illegal.
I don't know, because I also don't know of I'm sure there's other situations that are just as compelling as like rape and stuff that I'm not thinking of, right? Like that, like I wouldn't want to go so far as to say.
So would you say that abortion's sort of on demand for no particular reason, you would say that should be completely illegal at any stage?
Well, there
of the
shouldn't be
pregnancy?
infrastructure for that then, I would say, right? Like, not that it's illegal. Like, you shouldn't be fining someone for doing it, but you shouldn't have the infrastructure in place for it. Like, the system should be a little more like involved, right?
What do you mean? Like
I don't know,
no tax dollars, or just like no clinics that give abortions?
No
like,
tax dollars. You have to get referred by like a psych. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing, right? But like referred by like a psychologist or doctor, or you have to go to like. I think we mentioned this before when we were like at work one day.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're like, you have to have a few mandated counseling sessions for like a counselor to sign off on it or something.
Yeah.
Like if the infrastructure was different, right?
Okay.
Because like I said, I'm sure there's situations like rape and stuff where like, or if someone's like literally going to commit suicide if they don't get it, right? Like if it's like, I'm not living with this, right? Like I think those are decisions that involve someone that understands that a lot more than I am. Like that's like psychologist, that's doctor, right? Like that's not me, recent engineering grad, right? I think that's a lot more intricate and involved and requires. So I'm sure that that shouldn't be illegal and taken away from some situations, but yeah, I think the structure.
So I just want to nail down your opinion here. Do you still think abortion services should be available to some extent? Like, should there be clinics that give people abortions for whatever reason?
Yes, but I don't know what those reasons would be. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think? Well, because you did say before that it would be more comfortable for you to be living in a country where to some extent that was a protected right. So
my opinion on it is if you're going to legally protect something like abortion, and if you're going to fund abortion with tax dollars, I think what you should also do is you should be funding the other options, like, ways not to get pregnant. Like all of that should if the government's going to pay you to get rid of a baby, the government should also be willing to pay for you to not have a baby, because chances are it'll save them more money in the long run, right?
Alternatives like foster, like make those more available and infrastructurally
Yeah, like more
capable of
social
saying-
programs, like better adoption programs, and just better federally mandated childcare systems if you do want to give up
or
the
like
baby.
free childcare so you go to school or something.
Yeah.
Like anything.
I also-
take,
But yeah. So if the government's going to fund abortions, I think the government should also give you free birth control and free condoms, and like anything having to do with preventing a pregnancy, that should be freely available to you no matter what.
So that's an interesting perspective.
And
yeah, okay.
well, and it's one of those things, like, if you're gonna give people autonomy over their body, which I'm not gonna tell people one way or the other what they should or shouldn't do, but you should be able to also make a choice. Like, I mean, if we're gonna get personal, I don't take birth control right now because hormonal birth control freaks me out because it messes with you.
Right.
To get personal, I'm not on any form of birth control. Hormonal birth control freaks me out because it kind of messes with you. And like, we don't have extended healthcare benefits, so like we don't have any drug coverage. So if I were to go get like a pack of birth control pills, that can be anywhere between like $30 and $40 a month, and that's for hormonal. If you go get an IUD, it's like
cheaper than a kid.
What? It is cheaper. It is 100% cheaper than a kid. But like, if you go get an IUD, it's like a few $100 sometimes, depending where you go. Like, it depends where you are. It can be anywhere from like $150 to $350. And from what I've read,
last like 5 years though.
they last about 3 years. But
Okay.
so I mean, the problem with, if we're gonna get into birth control, if you really want to dive down that path, like
Whatever
you
it
read
takes
you read
us.
little positive things about birth control and different forms of birth control, but then you also read some of the horror stories. Like someone I know had a copper IUD. She got pregnant. She didn't know she was pregnant for 3 months.
Oh wow.
And then she had like the worst miscarriage you could ever imagine. She was in the hospital for a month
Jesus.
because of this miscarriage, because she had an IUD pregnancy. But if you're gonna pay for someone to have an abortion, if somebody wants to go get an IUD and they can't afford it, you should pay for that for them, right? So here's the thing with pro-choice. Pro-choice doesn't mean that you are pro baby killing. It means you are pro, you can choose what you want to do. So I think you should be able to choose to either risk having a baby and not be on any sort of contraceptive, and get the contraceptive instead. Right?
you're saying
I'm really glad that you say that,
So you're
because I
saying-
feel like a lot of pro-choicers by default assume that pro-lifers think that they're just baby killers.
Yeah.
Right?
So
I'm
you're saying
really
that
glad
pro-choice should be backed up a step though, and why isn't there options available?
Yeah, exactly.
I interpreted that different. I
think-
mean, maybe there, but I think what she was saying too is pro-choice doesn't have to be just giving you the choice after pregnancy.
Yeah,
right?
you
Like,
should have a
why
choice
don't
before
have
you get
the
pregnant.
Free choice before, like
Yeah.
free, whether it's free IU, like why do you have to pay without benefits like
Yeah.
hundreds of dollars to
Right.
have some form of
And
$50 a month to make
that
sure you
can,
don't get pregnant.
$50 a month, depending on your income level, that can make or break you, right? Like that
Right.
can be, you fill up your car and you drive to work for a week,
Yeah.
or you buy your birth control pills. Like,
Well, you're talking
What's
hundreds
better,
of
right?
dollars a year, right?
So-
You're talking
well, and if we're getting on that topic, I mean, I think we should redefine pro-choice too, because I know a lot of people who are pro-choice who have kids.
Right.
So like,
So like I said, I'm like 95% pro-choice, but I do have my issues with some parts of the movement. And I would say my biggest issue with the movement is the insistence that it has to be such a harsh binary. It's like, what pro-choice means is to be for abortions 100% of the time in every single situation. And if you don't meet that criteria, then you're pro-life. Right? I don't agree with that. I think like any political issue, it's a spectrum, and you can have a whole spectrum of beliefs. You can be in between somewhere, right? So that's one of my big issues with the pro-choice movement is I hate the insistence on it being such a harsh.
that's the
binary.
case. I think we talked about this. That's the case of a lot of like social.
movements.
Like two different sides of the everything has to become like, it's not a spectrum anymore. It's not a gradient. It's
Right.
this versus that, right?
Exactly.
Politically, left versus right. It's you can't just be like, if you're religious, you are all of a sudden anti-LGBT. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's never like
You're a bigot.
It's you're a bigot.
Right.
It's not like I'm not condemning you, but my Bible says like that is a sin, but that's fine.
Well,
There's like that's it's a gradient, right?
Well, you brought up the term bigotry, and I really want to hit on that because my opinion is that the term bigot is one of the most misused words in the entire English language, and I would say most of that misuse is actually coming from progressives, right? Because the term bigot is an umbrella term for a lot of things, but one of the things it defines is an intolerance towards other people's opinions, right? So what I hear a lot is, particularly in Canada, is the phrase, the pro-life opinion doesn't belong in Canada. Right? That's a bigoted statement.
Yeah.
Right? You're not just simply disagreeing with pro-lifers. You're
You're
not tolerating their opinion, and you're saying their opinion doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
That's bigotry.
Yeah.
And sometimes even literally the same sentence, some progressives will accuse conservatives of being bigots and be bigoted themselves in the same sentence. And it bothers the shit out of me.
And I would make the argument that pro-life isn't bigoted. It's just valuing a different side of the equation more than the other side.
Well,
even in their their definition of bigoted.
I mean, it's
right?
it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah,
I do think some of it is bigoted, right? Some of the some interpretations of it, some of the hard
reasons
line.
for it or whatever,
right?
Or whatever.
Well, and I think,
but as an idea, it is equally valid in a way, right? Like it's the argument is based off of, because the argument is, what do you value more, right? Do you value the freedom of the woman and the soft life of the woman? Like, it's not like she's literally life or death situation. It's soft life,
Yeah,
right? Like
of course.
quality of life or whatever. Or do you value the hard life of the baby, right? And that's ultimately what the choice. That's the two sides, right?
Right. But you can still be in between.
No, yeah, but those are the two sides. But neither of those sides, those sides aren't bigoted. One would make the argument that the other side is selfish, probably in both cases.
Right.
But neither are bigoted in their definition.
Well, what would make you bigoted is if you don't tolerate the other side. And I see plenty of that on the pro-choice end. If anything, I'd see more of it on the pro-choice end than the pro-life.
We've talked about this too, the hypocrisy.
The hypocrisy of it. I think it's a huge problem plaguing the pro-choice community. And that's coming from someone who is pro-choice.
Yeah.
Right? So it definitely bothers me.
Okay, I want to hear your fun fact.
My fun fact.
You told me
okay.
a fun fact.
I do. Okay, yeah. I'll elaborate on my opinion. My big thing, although I am pro-choice, my big thing is term limits.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna give you a fun little fact. When I read this, it blew my mind. I honestly didn't even believe it, but it is true. So
I had to Google it to confirm because I didn't believe it either.
It is true, right? Outside of Canada and a few U.S. states.
Don't name them. Don't ask her what they. Yeah.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
Okay. God, Bradley. Outside of Canada and a few U.S. states, there are 3 other countries on the planet that have no term limits on abortion.
3 countries out of
3 countries.
180, whatever the number is, right? Like
196 or something.
Yeah.
200 countries.
There are 2.
oh boy.
Okay, so these 3 other countries are in kind of a general area of the globe. I want you to guess where you think that general area
No
is.
term limits?
No term limits. Canada, a few U.S. states, and these 3 countries
Okay,
are
is
the
it-
only in
That's
the
saying
world.
that the Canadian government doesn't have any rules, right? Like a minute to midnight.
It's
kind of
we'll
thing,
get
so to
into
speak.
this later, but
yeah, essentially.
in Canada, effectively we have no term limit. We'll get into the reasons why later in the podcast,
you will not
but
be
we have no term
punished
limit.
if you got it done at essentially as that thing was coming out, except for lack of better words, right?
Okay,
That's
how
right.
many guesses do I have?
Just work out
As many
on it.
as you
Okay,
want.
Take
is
it.
this going to be like the Worldle game where you
Yeah.
tell me how close
No,
I am?
no, we're not going to tell you how close.
No, you're 3,000 kilometers too far
So
north.
okay, what's your number one guess? If you were to guess what area of the world these other 3 countries belong in, what would you
Name a country.
Well, name a region of the world.
Yeah.
Like continent. What?
Asia?
Asia? Okay.
Sure.
Are they in
maybe,
Asia?
maybe.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to guess Australia.
Okay.
Australia.
What's
Is
your
Aus-
next guess?
Is Australia one of them?
No.
Okay. Oh, New Zealand.
So
No.
so you're guessing Western countries.
That's
here,
the
right?
argument. That's the angle I took when guessing.
So
I guessed
Bradley guessed
liberal
Scandinavia.
tending. Yeah.
Like Europe. I would assume that most people would guess Europe when I phrase this question.
my next guess was going to be India. I don't know why.
Interesting.
It's probably
Okay.
not India though.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
But okay. But it's like, so you guessed Australia, New Zealand. These are all Western countries. So to some
I mean,
extent, you
India-
would believe that these other 3 countries
Is
would be
India a
kind of
Western country? That's very
I mean, it's
debatable.
the weird one. It's the weird one, right? But, okay.
Okay, what are they?
Outside of Canada and a few U.S. states, the other 3 countries on the planet that have no term limits on abortion are Vietnam, China, and North Korea.
Really? North Korea.
My first comment was,
Korea.
"Wow, we're sitting in good company." Like, that was the comment I made. Yeah.
So
Yikes.
that's the club that Canada is a part of.
Yay.
So
Deep bench.
okay, so I would assume that most people would guess Europe or some
Yeah.
Western
well,
country.
you're guessing like
right?
more
Liberal, because that's
Yeah,
you would
more
think of more
liberal-
liberal tending, because you would
liberal
think,
progressive
because you would think a
countries.
lot of these countries as being like, well, they're authoritarian in some of their cases,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
That like there will be harsh rules in place and laws in place. You would
Okay,
just naturally assume
China
that.
China
And-
makes sense.
and because
though.
Canada's liberal, you would assume based like liberal tending compared to
Yeah.
countries that we're used to, you would assume that like since the liberal side of Canada is the one pushing for that,
Yeah.
that as you go more liberal to like Scandinavia or something, you would see more and more of that. But China makes sense because
China
overpopulation.
Well, no, not because of overpopulation. Because I would guess in China, if you found out that you were going to have a second baby, do they still have the one child rule? Is that
I
still
think
a thing?
they got rid of it.
Did they?
I think
Okay.
they got rid of it.
Okay, so
So
let's
I
say
don't-
we're
kind of
let's say we're talking
I'm
in
not sure.
one child era. I'm sure they're handing out abortions like candy.
That's what I said. It's overpopulation
Yeah.
reason. Yeah.
But these days, like there is culturally in China, there's a huge pressure to have boys because you want to carry on your bloodline. So if you find out you're having a girl and you have all girls already, like what the heck do you do?
Right.
Like I don't know. In their minds, like I don't want to bring shame upon my family.
But that's not the government.
No, it's
thought. That's
no,
the
no,
people. So the
no.
government's the one making the law.
But the government is, in that sense, the government would almost be appeasing to cultural
Maybe, yeah.
norms and cultural.
So what I wanted to get at specifically was the term limit part of that.
Yeah, it's
right?
weird.
So
It is weird.
Every country in Europe, every single country in Europe has a term limit on abortion.
South America, like
All
everywhere.
of
Just
it.
put it in scale.
So
like,
I want to talk about Europe specifically, right? In Europe, the most liberal country on abortion is the Netherlands, which sets
That does not shock me.
the age to 6 months. So no abortions in the third trimester, and it just gets more strict from there.
I see
Sweden
what you're
sets the limit to 18 weeks. Austria, Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Spain to 14 weeks. Italy to 13. And then every other European country either sets the limit to 12 weeks or doesn't allow abortions on request. So here I'm talking about abortions on request.
That's
for no
kind of what I
reason.
was saying. That's what I was
So we're
saying.
talking
Okay.
like Poland here, because I know Poland, I think, has banned abortion on request.
Okay.
Did you say that
Yeah.
Switzerland was?
No, Sweden.
Sweden.
No,
What was
Switzerland
Sweden?
must be in the 12-week.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's just a bunch of countries that don't allow anything beyond the first trimester.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is Europe. This is arguably one of the most liberal corners of the world. Every
In the
single
Western-
country
in, like,
has
the
some
developed
kind of
world, right?
in the
Yeah.
developed world.
Yeah.
Every single country has some kind of term limit
Interesting.
on
And
abortion.
they would put any of the ones, most of the ones in the States to. I wonder where the states would fall, right? Like other than like Texas, I wonder where a lot of the states would.
What are the
Fall
three?
then.
Do you have written down what the three
I
states
don't know
are
what the
that don't
states
have?
are. No, I would
No, that don't have a term limit.
Yeah, I would assume.
the states in the U.S.
Well, you
Oh,
said Canada and 3 U.S. states don't have term
Oh, I
limits.
said a few
a
U.S.
few.
states.
Oh,
I would assume,
okay,
I'm not
okay.
sure what they
I would
are.
assume.
okay.
I don't want to really assume, but I would assume like California.
Yeah.
Maybe like.
New York. I don't know.
I don't
Maine. Florida.
I don't
Florida's pretty red,
know. Yeah,
isn't it?
fourth flow.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking spring break right now.
But you're saying a lot of them
Washington.
don't have. Kind of what I was saying. Like there should be more loophole, like not loopholes, hoops to jump through. Sorry. That's what a lot of them have in Europe. Is like it's not just a walk in and get one essentially. Like there has to be a reason or whatever.
For
a lot of it, he said, right?
for some of them, I think
whatever that
most of
number
them
is.
for most of them it's available on request up to a point, right?
And then after
Okay.
that, you have to have a reason.
Well, no, you said
or a referral.
12 weeks or doesn't allow.
Right, so I'm not sure the makeup of the rest of the European countries that either don't
you
allow
still
them
have
or-
like 20 countries that aren't like probably 20
Right.
European countries. So at least a decent handful of them would not
Sure.
even have that. Yeah, that's
Sure.
interesting. Because you would assume that would be what Canada's tending towards.
Right.
Europe, right?
So, look, I am of the opinion that being a guy, I really truly believe I don't have much of a say on this, but I would say that I don't know what feeling I have about Canada being in a club with North Korea and almost no one else, but it's not a good feeling. And I feel like if we not that I'm supporting a term limit, but I wouldn't be the against of a term limit purely from a principled standpoint of us becoming more in line with the rest of literally the entire freaking world.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is too, we can transition to this if you guys want. In Canada, you actually can't get an abortion past 6 months. Doctors won't give you one.
But that's the doctors deciding that.
It's the doctors deciding it. So my point is, if Canada puts the term limit at, if Canada puts the term limit at 6 months, it would effectively just be a symbolic thing, because no doctor is going to give you an abortion past 6 months anyway. So if you make that the term limit, it's purely symbolic, and you're not actually affecting.
So you're saying why not
anything.
do that at least, kind of.
I don't know what my opinion is on this exactly, because like I said, I don't think me being a guy,
But
I don't think my opinion is viable.
But that
on
doesn't
it.
mean you don't get to have an opinion. You can have an opinion. even
My
if you think it's
my
not
opinion
viable.
is I wouldn't be against a term limit at 6 months, but we would have to be very careful about how we go about legislating that. And I think both symbolically and practically, the people who determine what that legislation would look like would have to be entirely women, right?
Okay.
Like if I became the prime minister and part of my election platform was abortion reform, I would make a cabinet committee composed entirely of women, and I'd be like, you guys go to Europe, figure out what the fuck to do. I'm going to have zero part in this whatsoever.
Go figure out what to do. You realize if you send a bunch of women to Europe, they're just going to go shopping and, they're going to go to Greece and sit on a beach somewhere.
Sure.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is like, as much as I do think that as a woman, like women should be making the final decision, I think we should still listen to the opinion of men because these are fathers and, their husbands, their partners. And I think, although it should be predominantly women, I think you should still value the opinion of men on this situation. Like, let's say, you have a panel of 10, there's 8 women, 2 men, and the tiebreaker is female. Right? So if they come to an impasse and they're like straight 50-50 down the middle, another third party female comes in and breaks the tie.
Okay. My take on this, I also want to add another thing, is I think people often make it like a religious thing. Yeah. But I don't think it is.
Can I ask you guys about that? What is the connection? Is there a connection or some correlation between being pro-life and being religious?
I personally don't have a connection. I think it's literally that I want to favor like I said, the hard life of the baby.
Well, I know
that didn't have a say in the matter.
But there seems to be some correlation though. Like, why do you guys think that is?
I don't know.
I know. Here's the thing. I know a lot of people who kind of self-identify as Christians who, they're pro-choice or they don't have an opinion on the matter. But if you are kind of like more of a hardline Christian, like you follow biblical teachings and stuff, like it does say, like in the Bible, it says that abortion is murdering a baby because that life is protected. Bradley, you can look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible. But I mean,
it seems to me like there must be some correlation. Like I don't think it'd just be a coincidence.
No, what I'm trying to say though is that it isn't necessarily a religious thing though. Like there is just an ethical, moral argument to which side do you tend towards.
I agree.
Sometimes
I think that's what it comes down to. To keep the religion doesn't even need to come out of it for it to be for it to be an argument. I think people favor one side, lean towards one side or the other, and I think I'm right and the other side's wrong, but at the same time they're going to think that. But that's think the other. But that's a moral or ethic debate, not a religious debate.
Right.
Right. I don't see why you have to bring religion in to be able to argue the pro-life side. I think that there is a literal argument for the hard life.
You can make an ethical argument.
The hard life of the baby that didn't have a choice over the soft life. I keep saying, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean by that, right? Like the quality of life of the woman who knew the choice.
Well, so if Alex is right, and there's a verse somewhere in there that says abortion is murder,
then
does that
then
change
you can bring
now?
religion into it. And I think
don't like hold me to that because I could be wrong. Like, and I'm totally okay with being wrong on that one.
Don't kill babies or something.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know.
We can look into that later and add it into the description of the video if we want.
But if there is, or you want to just use the simple, like, don't commit murder, one of the sins that everyone probably should follow, right? But, like, I guess the religion argument would be...
Well, okay, again here, I think we're... So, what matters is the...
I want to get some statistics up.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to start with this one here. National Post. An abortion debate becomes increasingly polarized. Poll shows the views of many Canadians are more complicated. Okay, this poll, it's going to be a bunch of statistics here, so kind of bear with me. Okay. How acceptable is our current situation? 70% of people think our current abortion situation is acceptable. Okay, Alex, you listening to this?
Oh,
you stepped away. Okay. 62% of Canadians are pro-choice. Now I want to read this to you. Guess how many? Okay. So there's a survey that said, at what stage does life begin? You have conception, fetus is viable, birth, first 8 weeks, first 3 months, between 3 and 6 months.
Okay.
I just listed them in order from highest to lowest. Most people think that birth happens at conception. Or sorry, that
Viability.
life begins at conception.
Interesting.
That 34% of the Canadian population believes life begins at conception. And then you have 70% of the people saying they're happy with the current situation, which means you can get an abortion.
Those are fundamentally at odds.
Those are fundamental.
Yeah.
At the very least, mathematically, if everything lined up perfectly, 4% of those people are contradicting themselves.
Well, look,
really
so
hard.
I actually have this here. So these are in my notes. Canada follows the born alive rule of English common law, which doesn't consider the fetus to be a person with rights until birth. Canadian courts default to this principle because Parliament has never passed a legislation specifying conditions under which abortion is permitted. So let's talk about the history of abortion in Canada. I feel like that's a pretty good segue.
To drive that home, though, 34% of people believe life happens at conception.
I'd be interested to see how the question was phrased, right?
Because it was, when does life begin?
So, but that doesn't really have anything to do with abortion, though. Like, if you take that question and now you phrase it in the guise of abortion, would
No, it was
change?
It was under a survey for abortion in Canada. The first question: how acceptable is our current situation? Next question: when does life begin?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the order.
But the context was about abortion.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can kind of have both. Like, you can think that life starts at conception, but still be okay with abortion.
But isn't there something at odds with that, though?
Not really.
Because at that point, you're now defining this killing. That's defining it as killing.
No, not necessarily. Right? Because my thing would be it depends on if the child is conscious or not. Right?
Okay.
Like it's tricky because we barely know anything about consciousness, and what we certainly don't know is at what point specifically in the pregnancy cycle the baby becomes conscious. But I certainly think, even if you do think, quote, life begins at conception, I think it's reasonable to say that, let's throw an arbitrary number. Let's say pre 2 months, the baby isn't conscious. It's fine to abort it then. You can still think that life begins at conception, but think that because the baby at 2 months isn't conscious.
So what would you say if
abortion is
consciousness happened at 2 months? Science comes out tomorrow. Consciousness occurs at 2 months of pregnancy.
Okay.
What would your stance be on abortion then? The baby is conscious entirely.
Look, that's it's difficult for me because like I don't know anyone who is pregnant, or like I know people who have been pregnant, but I'm not intimately familiar with the process, right? So what I would say is, if we're going to legislate some kind of term limit, you have to give. My opinion is you would have to give the woman enough time to comfortably make that decision, and if 2 months is not enough time to make that decision comfortably, even if the baby becomes conscious at 2 months, I still think we should extend the limit further.
But what's that saying about is that not then killing the baby and committing murder? Would that be?
I don't think you can look at it like it's. I don't think
killing the baby. If it's conscious, you're killing the baby.
Even like you're even killing the baby if it's like 9 weeks and it's not conscious, right? Right, but it's like. There's an interplay between the rights of the mother and the rights of the baby, and I don't think you can. There has to be some balance. You can't.
But
sorry.
Once again, I think the rights of the mom and the woman and the baby, however you want to define it, the whole argument's based off of those rights being that the infringement upon those rights are equal, and they're not, right? Like the infringement of your right to security of body or whatever, and your right to life, right? Like I don't know, right? Like I think those are two very different severities that also have to be taken into consideration. And I think people just say, well, the woman's here and doing stuff, so they get priority. But like, what if those two consequences aren't equal? And they're not, right? The actual consequences of either choice are not equal. And you couldn't really, and I'm not saying that one's, but like I don't think one can even make the argument that they're equal, right?
I mean, I don't think they can be equal, but I think ultimately if there has to be some tilt, because I don't think it can be completely equal. And I do personally believe that the tilt has to go towards the mother, because the mother is the one who is a sentient, living, fully conscious human being.
The mother is the one that made the choice, knowing the risk, and will ultimately live. Typically, you know what I mean? Live in spite of it.
This is the point that I made at the beginning of the podcast is coming in here, right?
Yeah.
You guys are at the point where if you had a kid, you could comfortably take the baby to term.
Yeah.
Most people aren't like that.
Yeah.
Right?
But what makes it different than if the baby's I mean, mind you, okay, you might have played a bit of devil's advocate because it might go against your opinion. But what's the difference between the baby being a month before pregnancy and then being born at that point?
In my opinion, there's no difference. If you like a month before a month before birth and after birth, there's essentially no difference there.
So what do you think? What about 2 months before birth? Because you have kids born 2 months early that live completely fine.
Well, so I mean, we're getting into like the medical stuff here, and I'm not an expert, but what I have here in my notes is the biggest factor of the term viability is lung capacity, which typically develops at 23 to 24 weeks. So how many months?
6 months ish.
6 months.
Not quite.
Just under 5, closer to 5 almost.
Yeah, it's less than 6.
Yeah.
I have a client currently who their daughter is 7, I think. She was born at 28 weeks, and she was like the prematurest of preemies.
And she turned out fine.
Yeah, I mean, she was in NICU.
In the hospital for a
yeah,
while.
she was in NICU for like 3 months. Like
it's not good. But
they really struggled because it took a toll. Like they were completely financially prepared to have a baby. They were 2 working basically like Bradley and I, working individuals. They owned a house. They had no issues. But your baby comes at 27 weeks, 28 weeks.
You said 28, I think.
28, okay. I could be a couple weeks off.
Sure.
Let's say 28, give or take a couple weeks.
Okay.
But it was definitely, she came before 30 weeks. But they're going to the hospital like every day because as a new mom, my sister went through this. Like my nephew was in NICU for 2-3 weeks when he was born. Like you're at the hospital every single day, and when they kick you out at night, you don't sleep. So how are you supposed to work, right? So you went from being perfectly capable of financially bringing a child into this world to struggling financially.
Right.
So just because we are financially capable, we could have something go horribly wrong, and we have a kid with a severe learning disability, and then that changes our lives completely. Or we have a premature baby that comes so early, I can't work. Bradley's stressed out. His work is like, let's say his performance at work drops so drastically because of the stresses in his personal life that neither of us are working. So you can saying that somebody is like making the argument that we are in a good financial place, so we should think of the people who are less fortunate, but think of the situations that can come from complications.
Sure.
Right. So
and where do you draw the line again too? Like what's fortunate enough at that point? Right?
Yeah, and with viability, viability, people consider viability with lung capacity, but baby can come at 27 weeks and you lose it. I had a friend recently. She had basically same thing my mom had. She had a stillbirth at 29 weeks. So technically that baby was viable, but their baby didn't make it.
Right.
So
I mean, well, these are all things that are kind of left up to chance.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you decide to have sex before you're in that comfortable position to have a baby, it's like, yes, you are taking the risk. Bradley just raised his hand here. Okay.
Couldn't you argue that you said that those bad things happening are chance, essentially, right? These inconveniences happening are chance
after birth.
Well, if you want to talk about,
couldn't you argue that the condom breaking is a chance too, and you have to just suffer the consequence? That's just something you have to deal with when it happens.
You want to talk about inconvenient chances.
Getting pregnant.
I was talking with one of my clients the other day, and she has a friend who has 3 kids. This woman lives in a 3-bedroom condo, single mom, and already kind of not struggling to make ends meet, but it's not like she's saving a whole lot every month, right? And they're not living in the lap of luxury. She found out recently she's pregnant with twins. So she's going to be a single mom with 5 kids. But she's still carrying those twins to term. Because as somebody who already has children, although I would statistically, you could safely assume that she's pro-choice. You could safely assume based on
Canada.
Based on Canadian statistics, you could safely assume that she's pro-choice.
You'll be surprised.
But she's still going to keep those children because she values the life of a child and the life that can be. So I think as someone who's pro-choice, you can remain pro-choice, but you can lean towards pro-life because I know people who before they had their first kid, they would have said, yeah, I'd get, if I didn't want a baby, I'd get an abortion. But they already have a kid. If they have a surprise 2nd, 3rd, 4th pregnancy, there's no way that they're going to abort that baby.
I have not seen. I was trying to look it up before this, and I could not find statistics on the pro-life versus pro-choice ratios without kids and with kids.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting
And I think
thing.
that would be
Yeah,
interesting. I think that would carry weight in a way too.
Yeah.
That would carry.
And I think,
yeah.
and I think you can definitely still be pro-choice and have kids, but you can be pro-choice for other people.
Let's see if I can.
Well,
Right?
so that's the thing, is I feel like what makes people pro-choice has less to do with their
circumstance.
has less to do with their circumstance and their inclination to get an abortion if they needed one, and has more to do with the idea that abortion as a service should be a protected right.
Yeah.
You know, so so you gave the example of the mom having twins with 3 babies already. So not, like, look, good for her for having the kids, and but I think whether or not she's pro-choice or pro-life in that circumstance is irrelevant.
Yeah,
Because I don't
100%.
think-
But I think, but it's one of those things where, like, I think this is a person who, I mean, I'm reaching here, but this is definitely a person who knows the consequences of her actions, because she already has 3 consequences of her actions.
Right.
And it's just, you know, you got to deal with it. Right. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man.
Like I said, I don't think there's no simple answer to any facet of this issue. There's no simple answer. There's no one way to approach it. There's not, like, it's not easy.
No, but you're right. It isn't easy.
Okay, can I finish some statistics here?
Sure, yeah.
Some statistics. Okay.
Love
In
me some
Canada,
statistics.
like I said, 62% say they're pro-choice. Only 13% say they're pro-life, and 23% say they're unsure.
Okay.
So it's fairly mathematically you'd call
Yeah.
it one-sided.
Yeah.
Now I want to flip to the American one. Also, should abortion be legal or illegal during the first 3 months of pregnancy? 14% say illegal.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea there. Should abortion be legal or illegal during the second 3 months of pregnancy? 57 say legal, 43% say illegal. So you're you're within some margin of error, 50-50 there.
Yeah.
At 3 months, it should be illegal.
Oh, so like not even second trimester.
Yeah, second
abortions.
trimester.
Yeah, that's
the question
interesting.
is what that's saying.
Okay.
Should abortion be legal or illegal during the third trimester? 30% of people still say it should be legal.
Illegal or legal?
Legal.
Legal.
And
Okay.
70% say illegal.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. And
No, I'm saying,
kind
like, but you see there is a general 50-50 of, like, second trimester.
It is. It
right?
kind of.
So we're not as skewed pro-choice as you would think based off of, like, whether it's social media.
What was the
right?
percentage of people who think it should be legal in the third trimester?
Legal in the third trimester?
Legal.
30%.
That does actually surprise me, because as a woman, seeing my sisters go through pregnancies and my friends,
Third's heavy.
but, like, you know, 6 months in, you can tell they're not just getting chubby, they're pregnant. And usually at 6 months you can find out the gender of your baby, and most women have already started the nursery, they've started picking out names for the baby, they've started, like, getting stuff. So it does surprise me. I mean, I don't know what the ratio of male to female that they surveyed and stuff like that.
We'll get to an American version.
But still, it does kind of surprise me, because usually that third trimester, that's when you have things figured out.
so to counter that point, what I would say is, in particular, if you're living in a rural community where abortion services aren't readily available, it can take you a very long time. If you're looking for an abortion, even in the first trimester, if you're living in a rural area, it can take you a very, very long time to get to a point where you can get an abortion. And for some people, that carries over into the third trimester. So I don't think it's entirely...
Okay, here's some more interesting ones then.
Okay.
Okay, this legal or illegal? This was the question. If should it be illegal or legal to have an abortion if the family does not want the baby to be a certain sex?
Oh, that's so sexist.
Okay.
What do you think it should be? What would your gut... Like, that seems like a ridiculous... Like,
Wait, so
I
phrase
guess
that again?
Okay, sorry. Should it be legal or illegal for the family exclusively for the family not want a baby because of a certain sex?
So if you want a boy and you find out you're having a girl, you're like, heck no.
No matter the trimester.
Yeah.
There's no way to legislate that.
Yeah.
There's no way to legislate
But we're
that.
talking hypothetically.
In
Okay,
principle,
ethically,
yeah.
what do you think ethically?
Ethically, I'm totally against that, for sure.
16% say yeah, and then 84% say no. It should be
Okay,
illegal.
fair enough, yeah.
If the woman or family cannot afford it, it's pretty close to 50-50, 57-43, which I think was the same number for the second trimester. So that's
Okay.
puts those in similar ballparks.
Right.
If the baby is physically impaired, 75% say legal, 25% say illegal. If the baby is mentally impaired, 76% say legal, 24% say illegal.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that is another one that I think is I forget who I was talking to about it. And I'm like, once again, I'm still pro-life in it. But that is another, like, more sad thing to take a stance on.
Well, here's the thing. I've heard, like, you know, I've read some articles and, like, I've actually seen some documentaries where a woman was told your baby is severely mentally impaired. Basically, for lack of better terms, your baby is going to be a vegetable. They're going to be a financial hardship. Like, you shouldn't keep this baby because they're going to do nothing as a human being, and they're going to provide nothing to the human race other than taking up oxygen.
Yeah.
And the baby comes out and they are mentally impaired, but they have functionality and they can do stuff, and it's not as bad as the doctor said it was.
Yeah.
Right?
It is hard to say. That's the thing, is they speak with certainty, but
Yeah.
it is hard to
It's
find
tricky.
out.
You don't know if
Yeah.
that's a fluke or if that's
Exactly.
how generally things happen.
I mean, there's more than one case of that, but at the
Sure,
same time,
sure.
like, are those the outliers? But, you know, do you take a chance on that?
Now I have some more other ones here. I just like that. Okay, these ones are in favor of law or not, and it's my whole, like, there should be more hoops, or like the Europe countries that say that. Okay,
Sorry, is this Canada?
this is
or-
Canada still, but this is
Okay.
like,
Still
but this is all
Canada.
the ones I'm going to ask. The ones that these questions are along the lines of, like, shouldn't be readily available and stuff, right?
Okay.
Should there be a law requiring doctors to inform patients about the risk of abortion?
Yeah.
I would say yeah.
Yeah?
7% say no.
That's pretty small.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
But they're going to get bigger. They're only get
Okay.
bigger.
Okay.
Should there be a law requiring doctors to inform patients about alternatives?
Yeah.
I would say there should be.
I said
I
there should.
think it's not bad to mention alternatives.
As like
Would
a
you
form
be
of
okay?
counseling?
Would
Yeah,
you be okay
I-
with just a law that the doctor says, I have to give you this pamphlet to read through or something?
I think
Ask you
laws
to
like
do
that actually exist. I'm pretty sure. I have notes here about Alberta's policy when it comes to this,
Okay.
and it does specifically mention.
Okay, so province law.
Counselor. Yeah.
22% say there should be no law about that. Which is weird, because I'm like, why is that a bad thing to have that
Yeah.
law? Shouldn't you?
I mean, if you've already made up your mind.
Even if that
Yeah.
saves, whatever you want to say, saves like a few lives and the mom ends up being happy for it.
Look,
Isn't that a
you
good thing?
have to be careful about how you go about that.
Yeah.
Like, are you actively trying to get someone to not have an abortion, or are you purely just educating
No, it was-
them on
should
your
the-
circumstances?
Should there be a
right?
law requiring doctors to inform patients about alternatives?
I think it's
Just
a matter of
inform.
education on.
Education.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
100%.
Then that should be
Yeah.
should be fine.
Yeah, of course.
22% say no. Should there be a law requiring women seeking abortion to wait 24 hours?
before
once it-
making the decision.
You know,
Basically,
you come in for an abortion and it's like the doctor refuses to do it on the spot. It's like you have to come back to they sit down with you and you have to come back in 24 hours to confirm your appointment or whatever.
like you have to sleep on it.
Yeah, they make you sleep on it.
Kind of like instead of making the decision over the phone with the doctor and then going in and getting the abortion, you have to go in for a consultation and then you have to sleep on it and call them the next day and say I want. They'll say like, okay, we'll put a tentative appointment for 24 hours from now, 3 p.m. tomorrow. You will have a tentative abortion, but you need to sleep on it, and by 1 p.m. you need to let us know if you want it.
Because once
Otherwise,
again,
we're canceling.
I'm
the
all
appointment.
for that. That's not illegal.
I don't know if I would. I wouldn't support legislating that. I wouldn't support making it illegal.
Personally, I would.
Fair enough. We can disagree about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm okay
What
disagreeing
are
on
the
that.
makeup?
35% say they're opposed to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Should there be a law making it illegal to perform a partial birth abortion conducted in latent pregnancy, except in cases to save the mother's life? I don't really know what a partial birth is. Yeah, the grammar errors in this.
Like a live birth?
Should there be a law making it illegal to perform a partial birth abortion conducted in a late pregnancy, except in cases to save? So except for medical
They're probably
situations.
talking about live births. Like there's the whole there are
Not
different
live, yeah.
there are different ways to do late term abortions. I think you can kill the fetus while it's still inside, or you can birth the fetus and then kill it after.
Okay,
right?
so-
They're probably
I just looked it up. So what defines a partial birth abortion means an abortion in which the person performing the abortion deliberately and intentionally vaginally delivers a living fetus until, in the case of head first presentation, the entire fetal head is outside the... Oh, hang on. I guess I better actually click on that. In the case of head first presentation, the entire fetal head is outside the body of the mother, or in the case of breech presentation, if you don't know what breeching is, it's when the head is up, so the baby comes basically legs first. Where was I? Breech presentation. Any part of the fetal trunk past the navel is outside the body of the mother for the purpose of performing an overt act that the person knows will kill the partially delivered fetus. Or B, performs the overt act other than completion of delivery that kills the partial delivered living fetus.
Is that just
so
the
you
way
are,
of doing it so the mom doesn't have to get any like shots or anything? Is that essentially?
I have no idea.
I mean, that sounds kind of messed up.
It's basically babies half out. Well,
so do you think that should be an option?
So we're talking about we're talking about legislating this stuff, or just adding it as a form of counseling.
Well, should there be a law making this illegal?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So to put the whole like partial birth thing into perspective.
Okay.
If you have a late term miscarriage, like the 29 weeks I've talked about a couple times,
and you have to have a
stillbirth. This is basically the procedure that they do. So they basically induce you, and then it's called an intact dilation and extraction.
I have no comment on it. I don't even know what the alternatives are in late pregnancy. I just don't know what I don't know how.
I mean, the fact that one, don't agree with abortion in general, and two, definitely do not agree with late term.
What
abortion.
I'm saying is if abortion's legal, would I support this being illegal? I have no comment because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what the alternative is.
Here's what I'll contribute.
Yeah.
I don't support legislating that in any way through laws, right? But what I do support is, look. So Alberta has a document called the Alberta Health Services Termination of Pregnancy Policy.
Yeah.
Anyone can access this on the internet, and it's basically how doctors go about giving abortions after 21 weeks, which in Alberta is the cap. It's like past 21 weeks, you need to meet certain criteria to get an abortion, and that criteria has to be signed off by a physician.
21 weeks is...
You're halfway through.
Second trimester. No, that's
it's
almost...
five,
That's just
and a
into your
quarter
third.
months.
That's just into your third.
5.25
Yeah.
months.
Oh, it's before your third trimester.
Right.
Yeah.
It's way before.
You're
So-
like 4.5 to 5 months in.
Yeah.
So this document, anyone online can read it, and they have a they have a section here for live births, and it's not a law. Like they're not legislating it. They're adding it as a consideration, and they're emphasizing it that it should be a consideration. This is what it says. I'm quoting here. For terminations of pregnancy after 21 weeks, there must be careful consideration and documentation for a do not resuscitate order in anticipation of a live birth. So they're not saying that...
Can you read that again one more time?
For terminations of pregnancy after 21 weeks, there must be careful consideration and documentation for a do not resuscitate order in anticipation of a live birth. So if you're giving an abortion in the third or after 21 weeks, it's possible for when the baby's aborted, it's alive. And what they're saying is here, you have to consider signing documents saying that if that does happen, there has to be writing saying that you can't all of a sudden change your mind and tell the doctors to now resuscitate the baby.
Yeah.
You're basically saying like you need to say in writing that if a stillbirth happens, or sorry, if a live birth happens, the doctors need to just let the baby die and they can't resuscitate it.
Now, this actually brings an interesting side of things. As a doctor, you take the Hippocratic Oath when you become a doctor, and you do everything you can to save a life. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like there's lots of cases where like this, like a serial killer got shot and goes to the hospital. The doctors actually have to do everything they can to save that life before, like they can't just be like, well, you're a horrible person, we're just going to let you die. Like, no, they have to do absolutely everything in their power to save that life. So, I mean, like a do not resuscitate order, that's pretty clear. They're not allowed to break that. Yeah. That's a line they cannot cross. Mm-hmm. But as a doctor, I wonder how they feel about
Well, so look, when it comes to the fetus, that's a gray area, right? I don't think you can, like, you guys can disagree on this. Well, personally, I don't think you can make a direct comparison between a fetus and a living, or like a grown person.
But if that...
I would even make that argument, though, that with grown people, you can have do not resuscitate orders or whatever if you're like a senior or something.
Yeah,
you can have orders like that. Yeah. So I would argue that that's...
I know seniors who have...
I'd say the only difference being that the fetus didn't sign that. But like I think... I would say... I would also want... We always talk about the rights that the people have to perform it, right? Like the LGBT, we've talked about it briefly, whether off or on camera. But I think
On microphone.
Sorry. I think it's important to protect the rights of the doctors too. If like right now it's okay. Like doctors don't have to accept doing.
Yeah, it says that here. So that document that I was talking about, Alberta Health Services termination, it says no health professional who provides direct patient care shall be compelled to participate in pregnancy termination procedures if he or she has a contentious objection to doing so.
And I think that is 100% important.
I
that
agree.
is very
I agree.
important.
You can engrave that into law, and that's fine. No one should be compelled to give an abortion.
That should be a Canadian law, I think. Like I guess provinces control the health system.
Well, that's part of the issue about about Canada's.
Canada. No, we're not Canada anymore. We're Canada.
We're Canada.
It sounds cooler.
Yeah, that's part of the issue is that federally, the federal government has basically just left abortion to the provinces to figure out, and each one has their own
advantages. Though is the geopolitical diversity of Canada allows more systematic and exclusive programs to each one.
But I don't think that has anything to do with politics, though, because we're talking about independent physicians here.
True.
This
document
that I'm talking about
in general
here,
for like medical,
right?
like whatever.
Sure, but I want to be clear. This document that I'm referencing here, it's not a political piece of legislation. No. It is a document drafted by healthcare professionals, like independent people who independent doctors who have nothing to do with politics, are saying we can't give you an abortion past 21 weeks. Unless you have some life-threatening reason for it, and you need that reason to be confirmed by two physicians.
And they're also protecting their rights as individuals.
Physicians.
Right? Well, it's appeasing the individual of them, right?
Can you imagine if there was like legislation that was the opposite, where it's like if you're a doctor, if somebody comes in seeking an abortion, you have to complete that abortion.
So here's the thing.
That
Once
would
again,
be hard.
Keeping names out of it, I know a paramedic, and he has made it clear, and it's in the system, that like he's never to go to an abortion call. Like there'll be another one that's going to like an abortion, whatever, right? Like, and they ended up accidentally calling him to do an on-site abortion.
Really?
On-site, yeah.
Accidentally?
Yeah, they called him. They forgot that they didn't see that on file.
And so did he partake in it, or did he?
Well, he said that that's an extremely unfair thing for him to put himself into,
or
for him to be put into, because he has his stance and he has his reasons for his stance, and he's able to say like that's fine. And then he went on site and figured out that's what was supposed to happen. So he's like,
God, do you know what he did?
No, I assuming knowing him, another paramedic came and he left. And fair. 100.
Yeah,
I have no judge. I actually support that. Like that's I think fair. Like that was not on. It's not. He shouldn't have to pay the punishment for whoever called him not reading the thing on file. That's a clear right that you can have. Right.
I agree.
Yeah, but I think keeping those people protected, I think, is important too. That they shouldn't have to infringe upon their moral or ethical code, whatever.
Well, it's almost like infringing
or religious
on somebody's
code, even, or whatever it is, right?
Let's say that's infringing basically on someone's like freedoms of belief and freedoms of speech, right?
Yeah, that's like a mental security. It's a security of like mental health at that point.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. One more statistic: should there be a law requiring women under 18 to get parental consent before an abortion?
I think that is a law, isn't it? I'm pretty sure that is a law. Or maybe it's 16. Maybe it's 16.
Sure, whatever. But whatever, you know what I mean? And this question is saying a kid, relatively, right? Like, should a kid need parental consent to get an abortion?
Oh, God.
That's a really...
Assuming abortion is legal. Once again, this is all assuming abortion is legal. And I'm making these choices.
Yeah, of course.
That's tricky because I would say yes, but there would be situations where it doesn't have to be the case.
Well, I'm sure there's...
Like, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. Well, that's tricky now, because if the girl wants an abortion and her parents don't, it's like, what does that mean? Are you saying that if the girl is less than 18, if the girl is younger than 18, her parents have decision-making power in this, or are they just able to be part of?
Or is that just they have to be part of the process, right?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I would want them to define that a little more.
It's 50-50. 50-50. Which might be because of the questions about what that actually implies. Yeah.
That's tricky.
Okay, now you were wondering about the U.S. or male versus female and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got some fun statistics for you. The U.S. is completely different, by the way. And so this is Gallup. The other one's National Post, I didn't say. So they're legitimate sites that do surveys of thousands of people and stuff. So Gallup every year does a survey about abortion. And so this is the 2021 results. Let's go here. 2021 results. Pro-life versus pro-choice in America. U.S. adults, we're a little mixed up. 49% of pro-choice, 47% of pro-life. That's 50-50.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
And then I guess those last
5 were unsure or whatever.
Yeah.
4. It's all rounded. There's rounding.
Yeah.
But like, Canada was, what did I say Canada was? It was
36%.
It was like,
or no,
no,
64.
it was like
64%.
64%.
Yeah,
and
sorry.
then like 14 were against, and there was like an unsure
Too many
element. 20
statistics in
something
my
were
head.
unsure. Okay, men and women. Men are 45% pro-choice, 50% pro-life. Women are 52% pro-choice, 43% pro-life. So still pretty close, but they're tending, like I said earlier, on the sides you would think, because you would assume that women are more about, like, they have that extra stick in the fire, right? Like, so they're going to tend more pro-choice.
Women will tend more towards body autonomy.
Age, 18 to 29, 56% are pro-choice, 39% are pro-life. 30 to 49, 50 to 45. 50 to 64, 48 to 46. 65 and over, 39 are pro-choice, 58% are pro-life. So it's clearly skewing farther. And I wonder if that's correlation with having kids, being more conservative.
But it could also be a case of, so, okay, this was a 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, so 60 years ago, think of how people were taught.
That they've proven
right?
that it's.
Does that
they've
not have
proven
anything?
that's not. It's that people tend to get more conservative.
Well, I guess
fiscally
the
and
60
socially
year
as they get older, and that's a trailing thing.
60-year-olds now were hippies back then.
You can plot groups of people over time.
Okay.
And if you match that generation skews more and more conservative.
Well, your values do change as you get older too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It could be a case of people who
it
have
could also be a case of
multiple
18 to 29
generations.
people are the ones less likely to be in a secure place, right?
Yeah.
And they might feed that like fiscal reason or that social economic reason.
Right.
Another way to group them are 18 to 34, 50% are pro-choice. 55 are pro-choice, 39 are pro-life. 35 to 54, 49 are pro-choice, 45 are pro-life. 55 and older, 43 are pro-choice, 54 are pro-life. Education. Here's an interesting one. Education. No college. 33% are pro-choice, 62% are pro-life. Some college. 49% are pro-choice, 45% are pro-life. College graduates, 62% are pro-choice, 36% are pro-life. Postgraduate, 68% are pro-choice, 28% are pro-life.
Interesting.
I don't know.
So that's weird. So I guess the further in education you go, the more pro-choice you get. That's
which I don't understand the correlation there.
Maybe it's a case of you've spent all this money on school. One, you have a whole bunch of student debt. We should all know about that.
It legitimately would play into that.
It could be a case too where it's like, okay, I'm going to give you the women's perspective on this. I worked so hard to get where I am. If I have a kid now, I'm going to lose all progress.
No, I'm going to turn away everything I just said though. Yearly household income, less than 40,000, 53% are pro-life.
Okay.
42% are pro-choice. 40 to 90, it's 50-50-ish. 99 or 100,000 and more, 61% are pro-choice, 37% are pro-life.
But I think
so that kind of goes against everything I just said about finances.
Well, I was going to say, I think these people with higher incomes tend to be very career focused. And so they don't, like, for example, a female lawyer has to work very hard. Like, you've put in 8 years of school, thousands of hours to get where you are.
That's a good
the
point,
last thing you want to do is quote unquote ruin your career for a baby, right? And then, if you do have a kid, and I do know a lawyer who actually struggled with this when she was having a kid. She said, I love my job and I love my career and I've worked so hard, but I also want a kid. But I also don't want to be absent mother because I love my career. She's like, how do I love my career and my child equally and give them both the attention that they need to thrive, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's what career-oriented women, that's probably why they lean more towards being pro-life.
You also see cases of, look geographically.
Sorry, pro-choice, not
higher income, you're going to trend more, like which states you're going to trend more towards for those like super high incomes too. That'll pull it too, right? You're going to have your Californias and your New Yorks be pulling a lot of that income. Like to get by in
I don't know, man. There are rich people everywhere.
Everywhere.
Wyoming has a lot of rich people.
But to get by in urban California, you are making over $100,000 a year by definition.
Which is
pretty close.
Which is crazy.
Whereas in urban Texas,
okay.
You don't, right? So
you can make $30,000 a year and live in a mansion.
So there are layers. I'm not saying that makes up for all of it, but there are layers. I feel like that money statistic in and of itself doesn't mean a whole lot because of the geopolitical diversity.
This is an onion,
right? Okay. Conservative and Republican, liberal and stuff, you have about like an 80-20, depending on what side you're on. Then the last one here. Attend religious services. Weekly attending. You attend weekly. 23% are pro-choice, 75% are pro-life. Nearly weekly or monthly. 40% are pro-choice, 54% are pro-life. Never or seldom, like your Christmas Eves and your Easters maybe, 64% are pro-choice, 30% are pro-life.
Okay, there has to be a correlation there. I refuse to believe that that's just a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm saying there's a correlation, but I don't know what I don't.
You don't know what the correlation is, but there must be some correlation there.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, is it as simple as just like, thou shalt not commit murder? But no, because I would assume even non-religious people believe that, right? So there's another element to it. It's not just that simple.
Of course.
Is it just that conservative? Is it just that religious people are more likely to be conservative or vice, like, whatever way you chicken and egg that? Like, yeah.
That could be it, man. That could be it. I don't know.
And then I just want to end this statistics session with Bradley with, I showed Charles a statistic that, historically speaking, in America, pro-life is the only major conservative movement or side of it that's actually growing more and more popular over time.
Interesting.
Right? And I showed you this picture of it. If you plot pro-choice to pro-life from 1995 to now, green is pro-choice. And for everyone listening, there is a substantial gap. In 1995, 56% of America was pro-choice, 33% was pro-life. And they were clearly separate. And they have slowly been getting closer and closer and closer.
And crossing.
But right now, it's 50-50. It's 49-47.
No, so we're acting as though that's a binary, but I think there could definitely be some correlation between
changing.
Well, between people quote becoming pro-life, not in advocating against abortions, but advocating against the harsh binary that so many pro-choicers espouse. Right? That could be part of it. It's like, you say you're pro-life now. Does that mean that you are actually against abortion, or are you just against some of the more fringe parts of the pro-choice movement, right? It's like, we can't treat it as a binary.
Or not even the fringe of the movement, but what the movement, it's, because there are the movement that you see, right? Like, it's not even fringe, really. It's what the movement has tried to define itself as. The people that, the powers that be kind of defining it, right?
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's a lot of, if I wasn't an engineer, as an engineer even, statistics are neat because it's not just a binary. Even statistics themselves aren't binary, right? Like, there's layers to it. Like, the household income thing, like I said, like, look at where the most liberal, states are, and then the states that have the highest income will clearly be those states. Also the states that have the worst housing affordability. Charlotte and I talked about that once, I think, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may talked about it. I can't remember once again if it was on or off mic, but yeah, we talked about how the most democratic states are the ones that have the worst housing situation or whatever. Right? Yeah.
Okay, do we want to talk about how abortion actually works in Canada? I wanted to get into this way sooner in the podcast, but we really detoured.
Okay, it was all about stuff.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was really good.
A lot of tangents.
Okay, so abortion in Canada is actually really complicated. Before I did research for this podcast, I was just of the mind that it's purely an opinionated thing. Like, it's either you're pro-choice, you're pro-life, you're somewhere in between. It's not more complicated than that. But doing research, I've actually found that you do, to some extent, need to know your facts. Because in Canada in particular, Canada's abortion system, if you want to call it that, is essentially unique to the entire world. Right? And so... okay, I'm just going to go through my notes here.
Okay.
Abortion was illegal in Canada from 1869 to 1969. In 1969, an Amendment Act was passed that allowed abortions only if the mother's health was at risk. And then in 1988, the Supreme Court found that criminalization and legal restrictions on abortion were unconstitutional, and then they struck down the 1969 Act.
So it jumped liberal quick, right?
I wouldn't... Sure.
Maybe that's a generalization.
Well, look, here's the thing. So they struck down that 1969 Act, but it hasn't been replaced by any Canadian party.
And the 69 Act was which one?
The 1969 Act was saying that abortions are only allowed if the mother's life is at risk. Right?
Yeah.
And then in 1988, the Supreme Court found that criminalization It said, forcing a woman by threat of criminal sanction to carry a fetus to term unless she meets criteria unrelated to her own priorities and aspirations infringes on the woman's right to security of the person, right? So that 1969 act was struck down, but nothing has replaced it since, which means that 1969 act saying that abortions are only allowed if the mother's life is at risk, that act is still part of Canada's criminal code. It's just been rendered moot because of this 1988 Supreme Court decision. So because nothing since then because no Canadian party has passed legislation to replace that 1969
no
act.
party will be able to get in at the campaign on.
So the point is, because it hasn't been replaced, Canada is the only country in the world that actually has no enforceable legislation on abortion whatsoever.
What about China and North Korea and stuff?
It's still legislated, right? Like the
legislation is you can do whatever you want.
So look, Canada has no enforceable legislation whatsoever on abortion.
Whether
none.
For or against.
For or against, it doesn't matter. It has no legislation, right? You can, if you're on the pro-choice end, you might interpret that as a good thing. You know, people can argue about that, right? But there is no law on abortion in Canada, and that's essentially unique to the entire world, right?
Yeah.
So, what a lot of people are advocating for is that we have to replace that 1969 act with something, right? We need to introduce some kind of abortion legislation in Canada, whatever it would be, no matter how liberal or conservative it is.
You say that there should be something though, just to start.
That's the argument that I hear a lot, is there should be something. We should introduce something to replace this 1969 act that was struck down in 88.
How would you feel about the country making it up to the province, passing legislation that said it's up to the province?
Well, that's essentially what they've done. But
no
again, no province.
The province has to have legislation for it. You know what I mean? Like
passing it off on
but you're saying it's up.
Yeah.
Like we are so geographically that like you need to decide what you need to do for your province.
Yeah, I mean,
because clearly you'll have a much more pro-life foundation in Alberta than Newfoundland or whatever, right?
Yeah, I don't know how federal and provincial politics intertwine in this country. I don't know if you can actually...
The provincial jurisdiction is medical.
Yeah.
Medical is in provincial jurisdiction, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
I think I would imagine that that's a thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm all for the provincial governments, smaller governments, having more power than the federal. Because I think we've even said this before. Like, there's so many... Canada and the U.S. are also unique and that they're so freaking big compared to the rest of Europe that, like, the desires of Alberta are going to be vastly different than the desires in New Brunswick or whatever, right? So I think that there's reasonable grounds that as much things that should be up to the provinces.
I would say you have to make it as unpoliticized as possible. And if you do that, I think to some degree, you're leaving it up to politics, right? Like, I don't think that we should allow a system where... Like, as someone who's pro-choice, I don't think we should allow a system where a more conservative province could ban abortion, for example. Like, I know that would never happen.
That wouldn't happen.
I know it wouldn't happen, but I in principle, I wouldn't support the idea of that. I still think there should be... Personally, I still think there should be some form of federal legislation that applies to all provinces that to some degree protects the woman's right to choose. That's my opinion on that. I'm not saying it's the opinion, but it's mine, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, I wouldn't say leave it up to the provinces entirely.
I mean, for leaving it up to them other than protected extremes or something like that.
Sure.
Like if they said no abortions after 6 months or whatever, and you have to allow them under X, Y, and Z time frame or reasons. But other than that, the province.
I would say that's reasonable.
Because then Alberta could tend towards the 4 months or 3 months, whatever they want to do, right? Like the 3 months, they can go towards some of those European countries, whereas whatever province supports the current situation more can stay there.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant that the federal legislation should allow abortions no matter what up until 6 months, and then beyond that, provinces.
No, I just meant like the extremes of like you can't have any after. I was just giving example numbers, right?
Okay.
Like you have to allow this and under these situations, and you have to stop allowing abortions at whatever late term, right? Like whatever late term.
So
like they provide boundaries. They provide.
I do think there has to be some cutoff point that's federally legislated, so that a more conservative province doesn't end up, in my view, infringing on the rights of women.
But then I could make the same argument the other way, that there should be a upper bounds to not infringe upon the rights.
Well, it's both.
Baby,
like
right?
that line could be both.
So you're saying that there should be a 10% and a 90% that are banned or like support, like legally protected. Like you're saying that the federal government should say, for the first X months or X reasons, abortions are allowed, and after Z time, abortions aren't allowed.
After Z time, the provinces can determine what's allowed and what isn't.
I don't think there should be a federally mandated, because I don't agree that you should be able to have an abortion whenever you want, according to the current Canadian government.
Oh, I see.
Right? Like, that's what I'm saying. They should say,
that's
extreme end, at 9 months, you cannot have an abortion anymore. Okay. Like, if that was federally mandated.
Sure. We'll do essentially what that Alberta policy says. It's like, after X amount of weeks, you need to either... What does the policy say? It's either... The pregnancy poses a serious threat to the mother. There's reliable evidence of a serious cognitive or genetic disorder of the child, or reliable evidence of a fetal abnormality, or something about multiple pregnancies. Include sort of
something to protect the baby. The baby's rights are protected at a certain extreme.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the woman's rights. The federal government can do that. And then leave the provincial governments to...
So then leave the provincial governments to do what exactly?
Well, the provincial government, if Alberta decides they want at 21 weeks to have that, they should be allowed to make that legislation or whatever, right?
Okay. As long as that
the
21 weeks...
The 20% and the 80% are protected or whatever, right?
Sure.
Like the first quartile and the fourth quartile, however you want to define it, federally mandate those. Because I think another thing we came down to was, you me talking about it, is neither side's willing to give it all to at least start something, right? Like the pro-life side won't is digging their heels in that no, even medical reasons are ridiculous, right? As an extreme, but they're saying that, and then as an extreme, the pro-life side saying no, we should be able to abort it as it's coming out, right? We're arguing. I'm making too hyperbolizing here, but I'm driving home the point that but I think they've stopped. They haven't really stopped to say okay, can we acknowledge the other side at all? Because let's be real, the pro-life argument in Canada would get more ground and protect more potential children if they gave a bit, right? If they said, we're only asking that you protect the baby in the third trimester, except for untoward reasons or whatever, right?
Reasons X, Y, and
right? If they just said that, could that be agreed? Can the pro-choice people come down a little, right? You need some sort of common ground where you can maybe make some legal arguments. And I think, so me being pro-life, I would, I think there should be loophole, hoops to jump through and everything, but that would never pass legislation, right? And I acknowledge
that's the thing with Canada.
So that's the thing, is I also acknowledge that, and that's not how other people are going to view it. So instead, for me to be the most pro-life, I should be willing to compromise, because that's how you actually physically in the real world will see more pro-life
tangibly
actions.
Make a difference in the real world.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Do you get what I'm saying? So
I do.
So am I being less pro-life by saying, can we meet in the middle? No, I think I'm being more pro-life. I'm trying to actually accomplish one of the goals, right?
Canada's just you really wonder how much you can actually accomplish, right?
Yeah.
It's if the Conservative Party at some point down the line introduced even slightly hinted at some kind of abortion reform, I really don't know if that would mean the end of them in the following election. I really don't. Maybe that would just be enough for the majority of Canadians to be no, I'm not going to support you. Even hinting at some kind of, even if it's the most liberal legislation possible, even in principle, the idea of adding some legislation, I don't know if that would be enough for most Canadians to be no, I'm not voting for that.
Well, they, out of principle, wouldn't want the Conservatives drafting that legislation. I don't even know if they'd want the Liberals drafting that legislation, but
I don't know if the Liberals would even draft legislation like that,
fair.
right?
Yeah.
But
no, I
that's
think
tricky.
That's the one thing that we said was
right.
It is about finding some common ground of there should be something.
I think public opinion on this issue has to change first before we drag it into the political arena, because as things lie now, I think the issue is way too taboo to be touched at any legislative level and be productive. Right. So I think having podcasts like this, where we not at any legislative level, but at sort of a personal level, kind of get people to think about the issue more. I think that's important.
Do you have anything else you want to say? I have one kind of...
No, not really.
Tangent related, but like kind of extreme thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
I know we're all not this type of... Yeah. There is a more extreme type of pro-life that believe contraception is a kind of abortion in a way.
Oh, it's a very... That's like a
You're talking like no one you know kind of thing has this thought.
Like Plan B, for example? Do you guys know what that is?
Birth control.
Birth
I think
control.
Mormonism like...
Maybe.
Oh, no, they're not. No, they're not, because I know
Catholics,
a few
though. I
Mormons.
think Catholics who can't use
there's
contraception.
there's some
Jehovah's
sects.
Witness, maybe like some like you're talking fringe Christianity, maybe some even like non-religious people that have just really strong opinions.
But I do think even Catholics, like not all Catholics obviously, but I do think there is some tenet in Catholicism that says you can't use contraception.
Yeah, the only ones that are allowed like rhythm or something, where it's like just the natural body movements aren't allowed.
Yeah, whatever the hell that means. Yeah.
Well, that's
I thought
on
that was...
ovulation. You don't do it. You don't have sex during ovulation or whatever, right? Like,
right. No,
your,
but you just can't use...
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so like they say that that's the only type of contraception you're allowed to have, because like any other thing is stopping a potential birth kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but what do you guys think about Plan B though? Do you guys know what Plan B is?
Hold on. Sorry. Just to go back to
Sure.
the whole religions that don't allow contraceptives. Apparently today, the Roman Catholic Church is the only Christian denomination that adheres to a historical standard on birth control and contraceptive, and they forbid contraceptive use because it is a sin against nature. And this
And to be
is
fair,
from PubMed,
Catholics,
an article written in... mind you, this was written in 93.
There's approximately 2 billion Catholics in the world too. Or something like
There's
that.
a lot of Catholics.
Mind you, not all of them are going to adhere to
But
that.
it's specifically Roman Catholic, so that's
a large
kind of what we
but...
would consider Catholicism. So we're not talking like a Latvian Orthodox Catholic or like an Egyptian Coptic.
Whatever, right?
Like we're not talking about like different sects of Catholicism.
Right.
We're talking about like the Pope, Vatican Catholicism.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting to me that it's only Roman Catholicism and not some crazy fucking Jehovah's.
Even like Islam does not prohibit the use of birth control.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And like Islam, Hinduism.
Look, I mean, I do appreciate that Catholic thing of like the whole, I don't know what it's called, but it's like, don't have sex during ovulation. Like I have like I'm not
saying that's a Catholic thing. I'm saying like they would say that's probably okay because that's not an actual like that's not a man.
I think it's what they encourage.
Yeah,
and I've heard from people who are Catholic that that's actually a really good thing, like women in particular, because it makes you more in tune with your cycle. It's definitely an idea that I appreciate.
I like Mormonism. Also
no, but like that as a form
but
that as a form of pro-life, right? Like that as like a stance. Like that's an extreme.
I guess so.
Stance.
Yeah. No,
what, like supporting the rhythm method?
No, just saying like contraception.
Like you can't use a condom.
Condoms are abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More like a catcher's mitt than abortion, but you know.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason is exactly. I'm sure it's bizarre, but
yeah, I think that's probably mostly a religious reason at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you find many non-whatever religious.
Yeah, well, I'm sure someone in the papacy determined that to be a rule however long ago, and then that's just been a thing.
It's just
since,
stuck.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like Mormons. I know a lot of Mormons these days use a lot of contraceptives, even though it's technically historically forbidden by the church, but like they've kind of evolved with the times, so to speak.
Christians also don't believe in having sex before marriage. There's people
Lots
that
of them do it.
and some will be fine doing it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, is that everything? I don't know anything else.
How long was this?
We're at 1 hour and 38 minutes.
Okay, that's not.
Did you have a good time, Alex?
Oh yeah,
was it as bad as you thought it would be? Scary as you thought it would be?
No.
Were we a lot more profound than you thought we were going to be?
No.
Did you think it was going to be? Did you think it was going to be just Charlotte and I making fart noises and giggling the whole time?
Honestly, yeah, I thought it was just going to be like an hour of fart jokes.
That's funny. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on.
Oh,
I'm really glad you did. I think that was a pretty good podcast. It was pretty productive, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No problem. I go on a lot of tangents, so.
No, that was good.
If you want long podcasts, call me up.
We go on hard.
Oh, man.
We're bad. We started like talking about like Horizon or something in the middle of a like engineering podcast or something.
Yeah.
We did that earlier. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. This was the Art of Podcast on Abortion.
And as always, ciao for now.
Ciao for now.